When my son was born, I was in survival mode, just with everything going on. And I was trying so hard to just appear as that really happy, bubbly, engaging mother, and was wearing a face, my happy face, my animated face. And then I remember I was breastfeeding him one day and was just crumpled, right? Like, in my chair, just at the end of the day, just crumpled. And I just noticed him observing my face. And it was really that moment where it hit me that for my children, it wasn't okay if I appeared fine. I really had to be fine. Yeah. I really had to be fine in my skin. And that was a responsibility I had for them, but a reminder that even with or without them, it was a responsibility I had for myself. And that was kind of what kicked off really leaning into preserving, realizing that part of my responsibility as a mother was preserving that fire and getting really clear on what was important to me and protecting it.
I'm Keltie McGuire, and you're listening to the Kids Are Childfree Podcast. Hello and welcome to the Kids Are Childfree Podcast. I am back with a brand new season featuring all sorts of amazing guests, and I cannot wait to bring you this very first episode of season 4 because this is someone who I just think is so super cool. She is mom goals in my books. I think if I were to have kids, this is exactly how I'd want to be doing things. And so I was thrilled when she said yes to coming onto today's podcast. Now, something you may know about me is I guess I'm a bit of an adventure seeker. Specifically, I love spending a lot of time in the mountains. My husband and I, we do tons of big hikes, especially in the summertime. We love doing multi-day hikes in the Dolomites. We have an annual trip with friends. And one question I've often asked myself is like, if I had kids, how would it work for me to uphold kind of a fun-loving, adventure-seeking outdoor lifestyle if I had children? Well, today's guest answers this question perfectly, and let me tell you, she does it with style, and she makes it seem like heaps of fun. Today's guest is none other than Brooke Froelich Murray, who raises her 3 little adventure buddies in Colorado. Whether she is wrangling them on skis, chasing them on mountain bikes, changing diapers on top of a mountain, which, true story, she'll tell us about that today, or lazily wading through a creek looking for tadpoles alongside them, Brooke believes she shows up as the best version of herself for her kids when she's outside. With the goal of building community and supporting other mothers, Brooke co-founded WildKind, a community for mothers looking to level up their outdoor adventure. Brooke wholeheartedly believes that adventure is better when shared and loves to invite others to join along. I just want to say that as I had just mentioned to Brooke, I am very excited to have her here because, first of all, I think she's just an incredibly cool woman and someone who I aspire to be a little more like as far as level of adventure that I seek in my life. And I think you serve as an incredible role model for moms everywhere, and especially outdoor loving and adventure seeking moms. So welcome to the podcast. Just tell us a little bit about yourself and what we might like to know about you.
Well, thanks, Keltie. I think that's way too kind and generous. Like Keltie said, my name is Brooke. I'm raising my 3 kids in Colorado. We're a big adventure family. We love to get out and play. I waited until I was 30 to have my oldest. So I think by some standards of mom, I might be a little bit of an older mom as I'm about to turn 40 and I still am changing diapers. But it's really what worked for my family. And I really love motherhood. I was worried adventure would end when I had kids, but I'm finding out that it is really just beginning and changing in a different way.
Yeah. Well, your videos are, they're charming and funny and inspiring. And it does look like a lot of fun. So of course, we'll link to your Instagram in the show notes of today's episode. Definitely give Brooke a follow, whether or not you choose to have kids. I think it will certainly inspire you. So, okay. So how old are your kids today then? You have 3 children.
I do. My oldest is about to turn 10. And then I have his name is Huck. Then I have a 6-year-old little girl named Tatum. And then I have a little one who just turned 3, Levi, a little boy who turned 3.
Wow.
So,
okay, they're really great names, which I'm sure you
Thanks.
know. Yeah, they're super
love their names,
original.
Yeah. My oldest is actually his real legal name is Henrik, just in case he wants to not be a ski bum when he grows up, so he can change it.
It's a very ski-inspired name,
but he fits the name really well. So
yeah. Okay, awesome. So you mentioned you became a mom a little bit later in life, which I think for certainly most of the people listening who are women in their mid-30s and older trying to make this decision, it might not feel that old, but yeah, 30, it's like a little bit later perhaps. Did you always know you would become a mom or want to have kids, or how did that sort of transpire?
Okay, let me back up. I grew up in
Okay.
Utah as a Mormon. So a lot of my friends got married right out of high school and started having kids right out of high school. And so seeing that, I was definitely on the later end in Utah. Like I would go to play
Yeah.
dates at the library or whatever, story hours, and I would be the oldest mom by sometimes over a decade. But outside of Utah, in that bubble, you're right. It is actually, I think, a very typical age for when women can actually
Yeah.
consider affording having kids and consider having the financial and support to be able to have children. Growing up as a Mormon and seeing that messaging always being really hit hard about the importance of having children and about a woman's purpose being to have children, I had that strong pushback of absolutely not, and did absolutely not want to have kids until I noticed that voice was that urging, just feeling kind of quiet, but always there, and then a little
Mm,
louder, and then a little louder until I couldn't ignore it. And
yeah.
so that's kind of when I knew I really wanted it. And my husband at the time, wasn't as interested in having kids. And so it was something that I was more the driver of, and it was something I knew that I wanted to be a mother.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious when you talk about that voice sort of getting louder, like was it a certain feeling inside of you? Was it a particular experience? What was that? What did that look or feel like for you? I know it's hard to
That's a
articulate
great
probably.
question. It wasn't a particular experience. I mean, from the
Yeah.
outside perspective, I had a really fulfilling life. I loved my climbing gym. You know, I was able to ski 90 days a season. I had a job that I loved. I worked I was a molecular biologist in a human genetics lab, and I really loved my life. And I looked at a lot of those
Mhm.
things. I didn't seem like I was missing anything. It was just more a feeling of a life experience I would say selfishly really wanted to have.
Yeah.
I just knew I
Yeah.
wanted to have it.
Yeah. I don't think, I mean, it's funny. We use the term selfish to describe non-parents, parents. It's like, yeah, you wanted it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting what we want. I also, I hear a bit of conflict there because it's like, on the one hand, I increasingly am wanting this. And yet, is this going to be compatible with this amazing life that I have? And so, how did you work through, would you say you had to work through any concerns that you had and like try and kind of, I don't know, tell yourself a different story or believe that things could still be, let's say, adventurous or really fulfilling? Or was it just that the scale tipped such that the feeling was so strong and powerful that you thought, all right, I'm doing it anyways, despite my reservations?
The latter. They just
Yeah.
kind of came to a
Okay.
point where the scale was tipping and I wanted it. And sometimes as we're talking, I'm thinking it felt like when you're about to go off a cliff on your skis, where you're just like, "Ugh, I don't know how it's going to go, but I believe in myself and I'm going to
Yeah.
go. And if I fall, I'll probably be okay. There might be some broken bones, but I feel like, I'm going to get up and ski another day." And it kind of
Yeah.
felt like that with kids, where it was like things might really blow up. But
Yeah.
I feel like I trust myself enough to know that there's going to be something beautiful out of it.
Yeah. Okay, so it's funny because I decided not to have kids and I also do not ski off cliffs, although I like
So
skiing.
sorry.
No, I'm teasing. I'm teasing, but it's like I've often, I so afraid of heights, but I also don't skydive, and yet I feel like it's like it must be the way I just in my mind's eye, if I were to skydive, it's like you're kind of going over the precipice and you're like, oh my gosh. And it is that leap of faith. And it's that feeling of like, yeah, you want it. So you're doing it in the face of fear or maybe like certain concerns that you have because there is that draw and that pull. And I think that's where it's hard for people on the fence because they're like, oh, I don't really have that big draw. So what's going
Yeah.
to get me like over the edge to take the cliff jump on my skis? Oh,
Totally. I mean,
yeah.
and I don't know those answers for it. I'm so glad
Yeah.
that you had the service that you do, because
Yeah.
part of me is like, if you're not feeling that pull, why would you?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I also know that people, if they have that little reservation, they always
Yeah.
wonder. So,
Yeah. And, I think it's interesting in the sense, like, and this ties back to your story with your Mormon upbringing, that like trying to figure out is that pull, however great or small, is that actually me and what I want, or is it what I've been told? And I'm guessing for you, because there
yeah,
was such a like pushback of like, no, that's not me, that's not my identity, that's not what I want. Did you feel like you were conceding when you were like, oh, I guess I'm gonna have kids after all? Or like was there a wanting to kind of like rebel, do you think? Or
I mean, I definitely have a little bit of a rebellious
yeah.
personality, much to my parents' chagrin, because they're
Yeah.
So lovely and thoughtful and intentional. I'm sure I'm going to get this with my daughter or one of my kids
Yeah.
as well. But I didn't necessarily felt like I conceded. I felt like I
Yeah.
was kind of writing it myself, writing my
Yeah.
own story.
Yeah, good for you. And I think that's the right attitude. I know I've just had that from people where they're like, oh, I feel like I'm sort of like giving in to what people expect. And maybe like, it's just, there's so many different voices and
Yeah,
things to contend with. So, okay, well, good for you. I'm glad
totally.
that you,
No, I totally see that. I
yeah.
understand that too.
Yeah, it's tough to know like what's ours, what's someone else's. And sometimes it can be the same thing that others want that we want and vice versa. So, okay, so you mentioned your husband was like, okay, I'm not sure, but it sounds like you would have gotten him on board. Presumably, you had your eldest, Huck.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
And what were those early days of motherhood like? Was it
Oh,
everything you anticipated? Was
yeah.
it hard? Was it all the things?
I mean, it was like I would imagine like doing a hard drug where it was just all consuming and that kind of anxiety of being so sleep deprived, but suddenly not needing it.
Mm,
It was the most supercharging, transformative experience immediately. When he was born and it was just me and him overnight in the hospital, I just remember thinking, everything's about to blow up and I'm going to do that for you and I'm going to do that for us and it's going to
wow.
be great and we're going to be each other's partners and be with each other's
Yeah.
support and by each other's side. Not meaning to get emotional,
Oh, it's
but
beautiful.
I just knew that.
Yeah.
And very soon after I got divorced and began building a new life and everything changed. My career that I
Wow.
loved had to change just for a lot of reasons and everything
Yeah.
changed.
Wow. Okay. And so, did you anticipate like through the pregnancy that perhaps that relationship would be ending, or was it really in that moment of birthing your son where you thought, okay, this is like this relationship, this chapter needs to be done?
Yeah. I think it was a 7-year marriage
Hmm.
and we were good friends in a lot of ways and we were each other's climbing partners, mountaineering partners. I think very good partnership in many ways.
Yeah.
But um, actually, when I had got pregnant was kind of when
Hmm.
the wheels were really clear they were coming off. And when I
Yeah.
had found out I was pregnant, because we were trying for some time before that. So it was an interesting timing of it all
Yeah.
transpiring. Probably, maybe in some ways, the way it needed to be for me to
Yeah.
be able to build the life that I wanted to for my son.
Wow. Okay. So you've got a new little baby. This is your new partner in life, at least for the next
Yeah.
foreseeable
Yeah.
future. What was it? What happened next? Like, what was it hard? Was it
Yeah.
scary? It was a fresh
Yeah.
start? I mean, in a lot of
It,
ways, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it was totally a fresh start and it was really scary. I had a lot of
Yeah.
anxiety as a new mother. Um, I mean, Keltie, you haven't lived in the US. Look, there's so many great things about living in America. I love it. I love our country. I love so much about it. But we do not have hardly any maternal or paternal
Yeah.
support for parents. And so, I quickly learned during my pregnancy that I wouldn't have paid leave. I didn't even know what that was or what that would
Mm.
look like. So I had to start planning really early on. And
Hmm.
when I was looking at childcare and starting to kind of look around at places, the only ones I could afford with my budget of a single parent budget, I wouldn't even want to leave my dog there. And my heart broke for
Wow.
these families and mothers who I know were just like me and loved their kids just as much as I did, having to know that was the only option they had. And it was such a wake up call to know that my career needed to change if I was going
Hmm.
to afford a child. Um, my housing situation, I had to move in with my parents for a couple months,
Yeah.
and there was a lot that changed. And it was a constant work of I was going through a faith deconstruction and transition.
Hmm.
There was a lot going on at the same time.
Wow.
But at the same point, kind of like when there's some tension or some stress in life, it was like a river kind of eroding a canyon. The
Hmm.
bedrock of what was coming out were just my values that were the most important to me. And so I got to
Yeah.
get really crystal clear about what values were important to me as a mother and also what values were important to me as a human,
Yeah.
outside of even motherhood, what values really matter to me. And so I got
Yeah.
to really rebuild that from ashes. So
Yeah.
it was a beautiful opportunity that came out of it.
Yeah. That's such a beautiful perspective. And I think, so much of that happens through like this necessity and this force of change. And also, this is a big part of the conversation that I have with my clients and that we talk about here on the podcast, is that when we make this decision, regardless of what we choose, it requires us to really look at, what do I want for my life? What's important to me? What are my values? And so I'm interested to ask you, through that like bedrock moment, what were the answers or some of the answers to those questions in terms of like, yeah, what it was you wanted and what it was you valued?
Yeah. I mean, I think a big thing that had come down to that for me was really community was really important. Family was really important. Adventure will always be really important to me.
Yeah.
And then also just being able to kind of, I mean, I was able to do this before I had kids, but wanting to really maintain that part of myself that was just Brooke, that was
Yeah.
just me. I was still able to be curious and a little indulgent to my curiosities.
I like hearing that, because I think, for those people who are in touch with these special parts of themselves, or that whatever makes them them, they worry about losing that. And then for those people who you maybe haven't discovered that, they worry about like whether they'll ever really be able to, or what motherhood may reveal or take away. And so I'm interested for you. I mean, this is something I think we'll probably run throughout our conversation, but like I saw a cool video you did the other day, and it was really beautiful. And maybe you can like articulate it a little bit better than me, but you talked about having your young son in your arms and him looking up at you, and this sort of recognition of like what he needed from you and for you to be, and how it sort of stoked this fire within you. I'm wondering if you can give a little bit of voice to that. If I see I'm like I'm good at bringing out the emotion. I forgot to forewarn you about that.
Oh, you did it.
This happens on the podcast.
That's wonderful. I love it, because I think when my son was born, I was in survival mode, just with everything going on. And I was trying so hard to just appear as that really happy, bubbly, engaging mother, and was wearing a face, my happy face, my animated face. And then I remember I was breastfeeding him one day and was just crumpled, right? Like, in my chair, just at the end of the day, just crumpled. And I just noticed him observing my face. And it was really that moment where it hit me that for my children, it wasn't okay if I appeared fine. I really had to be fine.
Yeah.
I really had to be fine in my skin. And that was a responsibility I had for them, but a reminder that even with or without them, it was a responsibility I had for myself. And that was kind of what kicked off really leaning into preserving, realizing that part of my responsibility as a mother was preserving that fire and getting really clear on what was important to me and protecting it. And sometimes that meant being disobedient, or being looking a little different, or being a little loud, or maybe being lazy by some people's standards, but really prioritizing some self-care.
Yeah. I really like that you say this is both for your children, but it's also for yourself. And it's funny. I wish I just need to see. I have some notes here from a call earlier today, I should say. One of the things we do in my group program, we talk about different beliefs that people have around motherhood. And one of the beliefs that came up, sorry, I've got to find it, because it's like, it so relates to this, is that if I become a mom, all my wants and needs become irrelevant. And one of the other beliefs that we were talking about, again, these are what women who are on the fence are saying. Like, I feel like my needs and wants will become irrelevant. Another one is, I'm going to have to give myself up for the next at least 20 years of my children's lives, or children's life. I am curious, because I feel like there must be sort of a tension there between, attending to yourself, and at the same time knowing that we do have to prioritize our kids, and that it is a lot of work and there can be overwhelm involved. So how, or what has that looked like for you to try and strike a balance between like, I need to attend to myself for my kids and for me, and yet I can't just attend to myself. I need to look after my kids.
Yeah, you're right. There's some tension around it. And with my partner, that's something we have to talk about frequently. There are times I'm like, you need to go get out of this house and go ride your bike, because I'm tired of seeing your brows furrowed. No one wants to see this. And he's had to tell me that too. But I also try to be really honest and clear with my children about these feelings, and that it's okay for me to process them. Like, if I yell, it's not my finest moment. I apologize. I need to repair. But I'm overwhelmed, because guess what? I've never been a mom to 3 kids before, a few years ago. I'm still pretty new at it.
Yeah.
So trying to really be honest with that. But it does take a lot of intentional work to schedule things on the calendar and be like, I'm going to go skiing with friends today. No kids allowed.
Yeah.
I'm staying in a hotel with some friends tonight and having a slumber party so we can go, go climb a mountain tomorrow or something.
Yeah.
It does take a lot of intentional work.
Yeah. Well, it looks like, and I mean, of course, I know what we see on the internet is not the whole picture, but it looks like you do not just have time in the outdoors and being adventurous with your kids, but also, yeah, on your own with your girlfriends. And that seems like it's a really important part of your life. And that value you mentioned of like family, community, adventure. I'm interested, how have you been able to, and we need to, I realize we'll backtrack a little bit in your story to like how you got here today, but just in general, how have you been able to cultivate support to allow you to do that? Because what I hear from some women is like, okay, my family doesn't live nearby, or I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to afford the childcare. So like, how do you make it work to be able to do things for you?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that's a really clear answer that works for everybody. We don't live by family, and that's really hard. That's one of the hardest parts in our dynamic is how do we, the two of us, cover this all up? And we don't have a ton of money for childcare. So
Mm-hmm.
I understand that really well. One of the biggest gifts, I'm just going to rephrase it. I'm not doing air quotes, but that I'm doing them. One of the biggest gifts I had was when I was a single mother. I really learned so quickly that I needed to rely on community. And sometimes that meant I needed to build community. My best friend, Caroline, who everyone should follow, Caroline Gleich, she's amazing. And she talks a lot about her decision about whether or not she is going to have children.
Mm-hmm.
She is not a mom. And when I had my oldest son, she was really a co-parent for me for a little while in some ways where she really helped out. And so I learned very quickly that I needed to rely on friends.
Yeah.
And we moved to Colorado. I really didn't know any friends well. So I
Mm-hmm.
had to build a community. And that has been the biggest piece of keeping everything together. I mean, yesterday I took all three of my kids skiing on a powder day, which is not easy. But I knew that I was meeting two other friends and their kids. And so we could all kind of help each other. And these are friends that, we've only met since we moved to Colorado. So I
Yeah.
think really, if you don't feel like you have that support network right now, I think it's important to start looking at building it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, this is something I talk about with people is like, you don't have to have like every piece of the puzzle in your hands right now. You need to kind of know, okay, these are things that I anticipate I might need. And, this is the kind of support that I'd like to have. And then, like you say, it's going to happen over time. And I think specifically in having children, people forget that that's going to help connect them with other people who are parents and specific to their interests. In your case, being very outdoorsy, doing the skiing, I'm sure that's brought you together with other moms and parents who like skiing. I'm interested, so, I mean, we've jumped right in and people are probably gathering this about you, but, as you mentioned, it sounds like always been very adventurous, outdoorsy, and at a pretty high performing level. Is that true? Or when did that become a part of your life?
I mean, I always had a big interest in the outdoors and being
Yeah.
outside. It wasn't really until I graduated from college that I started to really dive in the way I
Okay.
wanted to. And so I didn't really feel like I figured out what I liked in life until I was maybe 25.
Yeah.
And I really leaned in because I was like, this is living. And I've missed this for the last 25 years, which is still very young, I think, to find a passion. But I felt like I was just so excited about it. I really leaned in. And that was actually a big concern before having kids. It was like, I feel like I've only loved this for 5 years. Did I
Yeah.
just get like a littlest taste and now it's over? So that was a fear I always had.
Well, and so I want to hear about that because, as I give examples, for example, when talking with my clients, child free by choice, one of the things we love doing is going for hikes. And of course, people say you can hike with kids, which is true. But knowing that it will look different hiking with children, you might not be doing, or you might, and this is what I want to hear from you, the multi-day backpacking trip, or you might not be doing the, 1,000-meter elevation climbs, whatever that works out to in feet. So, how did you once you made this decision and things tipped in the favor of I just really want to be a mom, how are you able to contend with this feeling of the things that are so important to me may be taken away? How did you uphold those things or change, I guess, the approach that you had to them?
Yeah. I was determined that they were not going to get taken away. I didn't quite realize how much they would change, but I was determined that they wouldn't quite get taken away. Very early on, I remember when I was out of the hospital, my friend was like, do you want to go for a hike? And I was like, I don't know if I really can. And then I remembered hiking is just walking. It's just walking. If I can walk the halls of my floor, I can walk outside somewhere pretty. Now, we weren't climbing a mountain, but we were just out on a trail walking, a little different. And early on, just kind of finding ways to adapt. I remember also with Caroline, like finding a protected place to set up a pack and play so we could go rock climbing and make sure the baby was near us, but not in the fall of, in the path of any rock fall. I have breastfed all of my kids on the tops of mountains. I've had ski seasons where the majority of the day has been spent in a lodge, but it's somewhere really pretty. So I'm parenting no matter what. I'm either pacing at home or changing diapers at home, or I'm changing diapers somewhere really pretty.
Yeah. I think that's an incredible attitude. And I think it's also this idea of like, would you rather do it to a smaller degree or maybe like a little more subdued, at least on those days with kids, than not do it at all, which I think is the choice a lot of people give themselves. It's like, I either keep doing this, really hardcore adventurous sort of lifestyle or pursuits that I have, or I don't do it at all. And asking like, what might that middle ground look like? And how can I marry the different worlds? I don't know though. I'm not a parent. Would you agree, or what would you say?
I would agree.
Yeah.
And I do think too, like we talk about this a lot, like my career has really changed a lot since I've had kids. I'm not working in a lab anymore. I'm not on a microscope at 2 a.m. I live a really different life now, but I do know that my son's going to be in kindergarten and, we won't be having to pay for childcare in a couple of years. And so I've kind of also taken that shift of, this is what a great opportunity to live this different season that's going to be so different than my life before, probably my life after, and just fully be in it and fully love it the best we can. And, in a couple years, I'll start working out again a little bit more regularly, and I'll start building back strength a little more regularly, and probably start working a little differently, or I don't know, maybe the same. I'm not really sure. I'm just always, as women and mothers, or even not mothers, we're just constantly evolving and changing.
All right, it is a new year, which means we are kicking off a brand new round of my 3-month group coaching program, Kids or Child Free. If you are a woman who is on the fence about whether to have kids or stay child-free, you have been grappling with this decision for far too long, you would like to make 2025 the year that you finally come to a clear and confident choice, you are certainly going to want to check out the details on this program and hopefully join us for the next 3 months. I will include a link to the details in the show notes of today's episode. You can also find info over at kidsorchildfree.com. And rather than going on about how wonderful this program is, which, by the way, it is very wonderful, I thought I would leave you with a little bit of feedback from one of the recent program participants. Here's what she shares. She says, I had never done anything like this before, but Keltie's content reminded me that there are so many others out there that struggle with this decision. I previously pursued counseling on this topic and found it wasn't helpful. The program helped change my perspective on how I view the decision and how I perceive myself in the process. I now have more peace and self-compassion on my true feelings about having kids or remaining child-free. Working through this with other women who were also on the fence was powerful and meaningful. I would highly recommend this program. All right, so I will leave you to think about those words shared by one of the recent participants. If you can relate, if you've been trying all the things, maybe you've tried therapy, maybe you've been reading all the books, you've been listening to the podcast, getting some insights, but you still feel like you haven't sort of broken through to get that clarity that you need. Again, the details will be in the show notes of today's episode, and I look forward to hopefully having you join us for the next round of my Kids or Child Free group program. Yeah, I like this idea of seeing it as an evolution, and to repeat the word you just used, it's a season, right? It's even this idea of like, oh, I'm stuck for 20 years. You're not like, first of all, I think if the perception is feeling stuck, we need to question, like, is that the path you want to go down for motherhood? But to recognize it's not 20 years with an infant, or not 20 years with a 5-year-old. It's going to be different stages, different phases. And with all of that, I'm going to guess that it must bring, like, I'm interested to hear how, if the past excitement or adventure was maybe like scaling a crazy rock face, which I'm hearing you say, like, you do still do some of those things, but like, what does adventure look like with a 5-year-old, let's say? What might that day on the slopes or in the mountains look like?
Well, it's changed a lot. I've skied 11 days this season, and 9 of them have been with a 3-year-old.
And P.S., just so everyone knows, sorry to interrupt, it's November 27th. This might air in January. So the fact you've skied that many days Amazing.
We like
Continue.
to ski a lot.
Yeah, that's
but
great.
It's been, what's that percentage? 2 out of 11 is a pretty high percent, or a low percent. Most of it has been skiing with a 3-year-old. And so that means we're on very flat terrain for most of the day. I might get to break away for a couple runs and get to go ski really fast and hard and have fun. But I know that it's always changing. It's a lot. It's like climbing a mountain. I know you like to hike.
I like
What's
to
the
hike,
mountaineering rule? It's always further than it looks. It's always harder than it looks. And it's always going to take longer than it looks.
Yeah.
And anything adventure with kids is like climbing a mountain. Slower, it's harder, it's going to take longer.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm interested. Go ahead. Yeah.
Caveat, you have the most beautiful adventure partner. And so maybe instead of focusing on the objective, it's focusing on the experience. And that is the experience I wanted.
That's so well put, because I do think, for someone like me, it's like, how am I going to do the big hike, or do like the 7-hour loop, or do the 10 days in the mountains? And it's like, I mean, for me, I do those things also for the experience, but just in my language, it's about like the big goals, the big numbers, versus saying, what's the experience like of being out in nature with my child or children and watching them learn? And like, I'm also going to guess, like, specifically for your eldest and maybe the eldest too, like they probably are like pretty adept now in getting down a mountain. Like it's yeah. So now you've got new buddies to adventure with.
I have a new partner. Yeah, I totally do. I mean, that's my goal. I see people who are trying to raise like ski racers or mountaineers or excellent scholars. And it's like, I just want a really decent companion, like a decent partner. I have a partner that I love, but like, I want to have like a buddy I get to do life with who I really respect and admire and feel lucky to hang out with.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so cool. So I'm interested. I think sometimes people think like, if there's something that I value and I want to pursue, like my kids will also love skiing or climbing and do this and that. And what I like to remind people, not in a way to freak them out, but like just the assumptions we make about the kinds of kids we might have, what the temperament might be, what their abilities might be like. Have you come up against, I don't want to say conflict, but like, for example, you think we're going to go hit the slopes today, and you've got a kid who's like, I want to stay home and watch Frozen Part 12, for example. Or, you're in the bike park, and I see this with some of my friends who are like into like really like hardcore outdoorsy things. They've got a kid who's like, I'm going to wear my princess dress. It's not to like throw the girls under the bus, but like, they're afraid and maybe they don't want to go over the jump. So how have you contended with that? A, does that ever happen that your kids want or express different desires? And then how do you handle that?
I mean, Keltie, I assume my kids are going to be different. I look at like how my parents and me, who I think we have a lot of the same values, but we have very different lifestyle interests or tastes. And I assume that that's going to be coming up with my kids. It hasn't really fully happened yet, but I know the day is going to come where they're like, ew, I don't want to go skiing with mom. I want to go, I don't know what. I don't know what that's going to look like, but I do know that's going to change. My husband and I talk about it. We're waiting for it to happen. And there definitely have been days where, we do try to go skiing. And then our middle child, who, by the way, is the most ripping, fearless skier in our family, but where she's just like, ew, I don't want to go outside. It's wet. Did you know it's really cold outside? I want to sing in the lodge. And we know that can always happen. So we do have that approach of just like, we want to be together as a family. We're more interested in like what that experience is going to look like just as a partnership and as a family. So, that's why my skiing backpack always has Legos and crayons and snacks. Cause I know that, we're just up in a really beautiful place together. Does that mean that I'm getting as many runs as I want? No. Does that mean that it's always the day I have planned? No. But it does mean that we're up as a family, and that still, to me, for my values, feels more meaningful than being like maybe getting to ski more by myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think for kids, like we were a big ski family, and like those are some fantastic memories, and it's such a great, healthy, wonderful thing to do. And 100%, I remember when I went from skiing to wanting to board and wanting to go with friends and being embarrassed in the lodge because my mom had these little packed lunches. And I was like, oh my God, this is so, cringe, we would call it nowadays. But back then I just thought I'm the world's biggest loser and I can't be seen with them. But I think about how much those values were instilled and how much like, I don't want to say it's a phase, because ultimately, some kids, may decide that they want to pursue different things, or they're no longer interested in the biking, or they don't want to do the climbing. But like having this influence of nature and the outdoors and the sort of adventurous spirit is something that it runs through me and my two brothers. And we are so different from each other, but we love animals. We all love hiking. We all love being in the mountains. Like that is such an important value of ours. And let me tell you that like we complained a lot growing up, and we probably said we didn't like it, and it was boring and it was hard. I didn't like doing hard things, right? So
well, and I think that's the thing. I don't necessarily care if my kids have the same interests that I have.
Yeah.
But I do hope that they have the same values. I do hope that they're empathetic, that they're kind, that they're community driven, that they're hardworking, that they're gentle with themselves and they're gentle with other people. And I do think that, spending time as a family outside playing is a really great way to foster some of those beliefs and those values.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm interested. So you mentioned your husband today. Now, how long have you been together for, the two of you?
Yeah, so I met him way too early. Again, I'm going to blame Caroline for this because she was the one who set us up. I met him when Huck was about 6 months old. Wow. And so he very early on got to step in the parent, from the role of being a super hot, cool bachelor, ski bum, mountain bike bum, living in Park City, to being a step parent very quickly. And when we were dating, how unsexy is it on like one of your first dates to really have those conversations about family, workload, all of those conversations had to come in really early. And now we've been married. So I guess we've known each other for almost 9.5 years.
Wow. You say how unsexy, but I also am going to argue how essential. And you obviously, it was essential you had those conversations sooner, because you're like, this is not a question of if someday we have children, but like I have a child today who needs, like I need something specific, and so does my child. How did you approach things maybe differently, or what conversations felt important to have that maybe you didn't think about having the first time around?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think the first time around, it was very clear that the parental workload would be me. And I was okay with that. I was just so eager to become a mom, really happy about, about all of that. I wanted to jump in and wanted it to be me. When I was getting in the serious relationship the second time, the conversations very clearly were different for a lot of reasons, but also just that reality check of like, what does it look like to share the parental workload? What does it look like to share the workload at home? How are we going to divide up time to work, to support each other, and also divide up time to just work on ourselves, to protect some of our own personal time and values. And also those questions of, what about investing in our relationship to protect that as well? And so those were conversations we had to have really early on. And I think probably within our fifth date, how many kids do you want? What do you think it looks like? What do you think discipline looks like? Because I was, especially having a son or just another child on my own, I was really concerned about what kind of step parent he would have and what discipline would look like. And so a lot of those conversations had to be had really early. So I kind of felt like I cheated because those were already on my mind and I was already asking. So I knew exactly what kind of parent I would get out of my second partner.
Yeah. I think it's so important that you had that kind of clarity going into things. And I'm going to guess, like, I don't want to make assumptions, but can you confirm or deny that these conversations have had to continue as the kids have grown, as you've learned and like gotten to know each other and presumably been challenged and screwed up as we're all apt to do?
Yeah. I mean, they still are. They still are going on. I mean, I was saying maybe a gift we could give each other is like a couple tune-up sessions for some marriage. Are we working well as a team? Yeah. Are we protecting what's important to each of us individually? Are we growing in the same direction? Are we parenting the way we want to parent?
Yeah.
Because I make mistakes all the time as a parent. And I mean, my husband's pretty good, but he's not perfect all the time either.
Yeah. I think having that sort of openness is what's essential, right? And is he like, if you suggest something like that, is he like, sure, like that sounds like a great idea, I'd love to do that? Or has there ever been reluctance with like getting on board with this like personal relationship development piece?
I would say that I'm lucky that he's always on board.
Yeah.
But I know better to say that I was informed that he is that kind of person, because I knew that he was that kind of person from a lot of the things we found out about each other when we were dating.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. I think, something that is perhaps a little bit alarming to me. You know, I always tell people I'm not a parenting expert, I'm not a relationship coach, but what I hear and see from a lot of the women who are on the fence about kids and considering having children is like just how little discussion and dialogue is happening with their partners, or that their partners are willing or open to have, about how things are going to look specifically. There's a lot of like, oh, of course I'm going to help or do my share, or we'll be 50-50, which I mean, can all maybe sound great to the ears of someone who wants to hear that. But what we say versus what we do and what that actually looks like and how we spell that out, I think are vastly different things.
Yeah. I mean, in our house, what we really have to do are, they're pretty quantitative. It's not like or qualitative. No,
Yeah.
quantitative.
I don't know. I always get them confused. I
They're
study psychology. I
quantitative.
should know this from like statistics
I also
class.
should as a science.
Did
Yes.
you? Yeah.
I mean, not psychology, but just from statistics.
Yeah.
They're very quantitative, where it's like,
Research.
we should know, what are the numbers on paper? I know every day I get to have my own time to work from 5 a.m. until 8:30. And then at 8:30, he gets to work. And then I get to be a parent until 1 o'clock. And then at 1 o'clock, he does nap time. And then I take over until 5. And then at 5, it's a numbers thing, because the idea of I'll pitch in when I can and it will be 50-50, just that doesn't usually work out for, any of us.
Agree. Yeah. I think you need to spell it out and be like really clear and specific, and who's cooking dinner. And if you're doing that, then what am I doing? And accounting for it all. And even like you say, in terms of like actual hours spent, I think is great, because then it's also easy to like hold the other person to it. It's like 8 to 5 is pretty clear. It's not like, I'll get some work done today and make sure that you're with the kids or whatever it may be. So I'm curious, you've mentioned a couple times now about like the work you do or how that may shift and change. And I know you have a very cool project and focus. I'm interested, are you, first of all, tell me about WildKind, but I want to know, is that your full focus professionally, or I know you're online a lot. Like, what do you do aside from being a mother to 3 children?
My main focus professionally is the content creation and influencing work I do, because that's what keeps my family, covers my share of the mortgage and our bills.
Yeah.
So that has to get the most of my time. But my passion project, the thing I'm most excited about, or that I love doing the most, is WildKind. And no, it's not a big money maker, but it is something that I really love to do, because I feel like it's so important for mothers or for women to know, number one, if you're a mom, you can still find ways to preserve some parts of yourself that are important, and, find some adventure and have a supportive community and network to do that with.
Yeah.
And also that just women who are outdoorsy in general, come and join us. Who's really fun to adventure with? Moms. We are, because we always have more snacks to share. We always have some whiskey, because this is like our one night out. So we always have like a drink to share, and we have a napkin. Moms always have YPs. You're well taken care of. If you're hiking with a mom, you have a good partner. She's going to take care of you.
That's so true. I hadn't thought of that. You've got your elevator pitch down. I'll give you that. So tell us, what exactly is WildKind then? What does it entail? You've talked about community, moms, we're doing outdoorsy things. What is it? WildKind
is a community for specifically mothers, but women in general, to get outside. And we're based in Colorado right now. We used to be across the country, but we found we can just really focus on Colorado. So we have a bunch of events every year where we get out and do different things for women. And we partner with different brands who are all interested in getting in front of women. So that's where a lot of our funding has come from. I mean, we just have done work with Dometic, Fjallraven, Nordica, like some really cool brand, GoPro, like some really fun brands that really want to connect with women. And we get to plan these kind of dream events that I selfishly would like to go on and invite a bunch of women to come join and come meet their friends and come find their people.
That's so cool. And so did the kids join you for these events? Sometimes, all of them? What does that look like?
Sometimes. We used to have kids join a lot more. And then as our business continues to evolve, we're like, you know what's fun? I mean, hiking with kids is fun, but I really love hiking without my children. Yeah. And I like to be with other women who know what I'm going through in life, that they kind of find that same respite that I'm finding right now.
Yeah. I appreciate you saying that, because before we jumped on this conversation today, we were talking about orca whales of all things. And I said, you definitely have to see some orcas, because Brooke hasn't seen them before. Recommendation to everyone listening, if you can see some orca whales specifically, do it. But one thing I said to you is like, you should see them with your kids. And you said, or without my kids. And I had to laugh, because I think we sometimes maybe make this assumption that moms just want to do everything with their children. And that's sometimes reinforced because there are certain moms and parents who like want their kids to partake in everything. And what I'm hearing from you is like grown-up time is also valuable. So is that something that's really part of your like life and schedule?
Schedule, mission, intention. Yes,
Yeah.
I love doing things with my children. I still genuinely find them to be my most fulfilling partners in outdoor play. And I do think they can come to most things. I really do think most activities I like to do, I can bring them and find a way to adapt to bring them. However, I believe it's so important to still lean into some adventure and self-discovery without them and outside of motherhood, because they're going to move out someday. And I really want my children to know that their mom's taken care of. She has a hobby. She has a community. I have such a full life. They can live their full life. They don't need to live their life to think that they're doing something for me, because I have that. I am my own fire. They get to go do that and build their own fire. And we can, like a healthy partnership, be there to always support each other and grow together. Not grow tangled up in each other, but grow side by side together.
Yeah, that is so beautiful. And I think even if nature and outdoorsy stuff is not your thing, which I would love for it to be, whatever that thing is that's important to you, it's so, I think, critical and necessary and essential to continue nurturing that. And in part to bring your children into that, whether it's music or art or books, but to also preserve some of those things for yourself. To your point, yes, for your kids, but also because you need to cultivate your own personhood and life on this earth. And it should not be inextricably linked with how your kids are doing and what they're doing at any given moment. It has to be like you standing alone. So yeah. And side by side, which is a beautiful analogy and metaphor. Okay. Before we wrap things up, I have 5 questions that I ask all my guests.
Okay.
The first 2 are finish the sentence, rapid fire. Being a mom is?
Spicy.
Ooh, no one has ever said spicy. New favorite answer. Okay. Being a mom is not?
Boring.
Definitely not. Not when they're hanging with you. Okay. What is one particular tool that you think would be helpful for people on the fence to help them make this decision? A tool, a resource, an approach?
Ooh. I would say a life-defining conflict to really get clear about what values you have. That's not a fast answer. Should I think about another one?
No, I like that. Tell us more about this life-defining conflict. How can we cultivate
just some kind
this?
of conflict? Yeah, I don't know. Lose your job, get divorced. No, just kidding. Don't do those things right before you have kids. It's not fun.
Yeah. But you raise a good point. Looking at, I think all of us have probably gone through some degree of challenge in our life. If we were to look at that situation, what would we want to like observe or notice that might help us define what's really important to us?
Oh, how about this? This was my answer.
Okay.
You should go for a very long walk outside and have some time to yourself to really think. What is that voice saying? What do you want? What do you want for your future? What kind of partnership do you want? What kind of life do you want?
Yeah.
Not helpful. I don't know.
No, that's amazing.
There's no answer.
No, it's super helpful. That's amazing because I have to say for me, like so much clarity always comes when I'm away from all of the noise, all of the busyness, all of the other people that inhabit our lives. And will an answer or clarity necessarily come in one walk in the woods? Make sure you pack snacks because you might be gone a while. Yeah. But I do think like just connecting with ourselves and like doing that alone or having a conversation with your partner or daydreaming about the future together, I think is such a great way to connect. So it's a perfect answer. Thank you for that. Also, no one has ever said that one before. What is one thing that you want women who are child-free to know?
We love you and we value you, and our childless cat lady friends are our favorite people in the world because you guys work the hardest for our children, work the hardest for our community, and we are so grateful for you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, you, of course, you talked about Caroline. We should maybe get her on the podcast too, because I know she's one of those people who's been like an incredible support for you and is doing such incredible work for all of us for the future generations. So again, this episode is not about Caroline Gleich, but we will give her a shout out. And I'm saying her last name the very German way, Gleich. Okay, last question. If you could give one piece of advice to someone who is currently on the fence about whether or not to have kids, what would that be? I know you sort of gave one, but if there's one more thing you could tell them.
You will always grow, you'll always evolve, and you'll always change. This is just a season. It's just part of your evolution. Things are always going to change in your situation. This is part of that story, and it doesn't end.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Where can people find you? What do they need to know Any invitation you'd like to make?
Yes. If you live in Colorado, please come and ski or hike or play with us at one of our WildKind events. I would love to have you. Even if you're not a mom, especially if you're on the fence of being a mom, come hang out. I think you just would be surprised. Moms aren't all that boring. But if you're just in the general world and you have a phone, come follow me on Brooke.Froelich on Instagram. I really love kind of building a community there too, and kind of just sharing the shit show that our life is, and also the most beautiful parts about my own life as well. So
yeah. Well, I find your little corner of the internet a very positive, feel good, inspiring place to be. And I love so many of the messages you share. There's a lot we haven't necessarily touched on, but I just see you as being such a positive voice for both motherhood, for how we as humans want to be showing up in the world, the kind of change we want to see and make, how we can raise incredible humans. So yeah, thank you for being you and doing all you do. And I'm so glad we met. So thank you for coming here today.
It was so good to connect with you.
Okay, now that we've wrapped up today's conversation, this is the part of the episode where I tell you that you need to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. And you really need to do that. And I'm going to tell you why. And that is because one of the big ways that people find and discover new podcasts like this one is through reviews. So if you yourself can go say what you loved about this podcast, why people who are on the fence should tune into the Kids Are Child-Free podcast, that's going to help other people who are also wondering, should I have kids or stay child-free, to discover us. Thank you in advance for doing so. I will be featuring some of the reviews in upcoming episodes, so maybe I'll share yours. You never know. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you back here soon for our next episode.